To put this into perspective, this is like over 100,000 gold of smelting that I'm going to be doing while we watch this video. That's a lot. Okay, where's Corium? 137. Okay. All right. Let's see. The video. Okay, let's watch the video.
Dear Blizzard, something has to change with faction balance or it's going to be very bad for World of Warcraft.
He didn't say World of Warcraft, he said WoW. Okay. All right.
Today I woke to the news that Infinity, the 19th ranked guild in the US, is transferring to Horde. This comes only a few months after the news that Midwinter, one of the top US rating guilds for a long time, and Temerity, another well-known alliance guild that's top 50 US and has many well-known community members like the creator of Warcraft logs, also both went Horde. In fact, no matter where you look, it feels like the Alliance-Horde imbalance in rating is bigger and only getting worse as Alliance guilds are transferring to Horde left and right. A feeling that's supported by stats, because if we look at the top 20 rating guilds in the world, we see 5 Alliance guilds, and would you look at that, one of them is Scrubbusters, a guild that recently faction changed, literally here on the front page of WoW Progress. The top 20 US shows 4 former Alliance guilds, including Midwinter and Infinity, leaving only 2 Alliance in the top 20, both of them on the Oceanic servers. In fact, to find a US Alliance guild that hasn't faction changed yet, we have to scroll to number 34 in the rankings. The top 20 EU, 5
I heard Club Camel was full of racists.
Alliance guilds again, including one who just changed to Horde. The top 100 shows 20 Alliance guilds.
Speaking of racists, thank you very much, PewDiePie, for the $2. Without laughing, I'll legit donate $50 to you as well as 1 free gifted sub. But what if it's actually not laughing? What if it's actually the bridge? What if it's that? What if it's that? That's why I don't click links, buddy. I never click links.
Of whom Scrubbusters, Midwinter, Infinity, Security, Familiar with Drama, Northern Sky, Above Average, It's Complicated, and Hard in the Paint have transferred to Horde recently. Of the top 100 guilds in the world, there are almost as many Alliance to Horde transfers as there are Alliance guilds. This actually blows my mind, as even I hadn't realized how bad this problem was. By the way, the same holds true if we look at the top rankings for 3-day guilds, or even for 2-day guilds. What we're seeing here is a faction balance disaster of unprecedented proportions in rating. Okay, let's get into the why, because people will be quick to jump on this and say, look, the difference in racials is small, it's typically 0.2% DPS or so, and in some cases Alliance even pulls ahead a bit. Oops, ignore that one. But the reality is, it's not about the racials anymore most of the time. I mean, sometimes it is. For example, the number 1 guild on our server, Easy, transferred in the middle of Kil'jaeden progression because, as we know, Goblin Rocket Jump was absolutely busted on that fight. Now, most of the time, the actual balance of racials isn't really the issue here. The issue is that over time, the tiny influence of racials has pulled most of the hardcore rating population to the Horde side. And this is really the crux of the issue, because the question for guilds considering a faction change...
What's this dog shit transmog, dude? Look at that piece of shit gnome, man. He's using the full fucking tier, like the TOS PvP gear with the helmet from It's so stupid.
Isn't, do you want your DPS to be Belves and Trolls for a 0.2% increase? It's, do you want to go to the faction that now has 90% of the raider population? As someone who's been raiding Mythic on Alliance side for 4 years now, and spent about 2 of those years as an officer, it's been pretty depressing to see the potential pool of recruits just dwindling over time as Alliance raiding loses more and more of its steam. And by the way, if you're thinking, I'm not a Mythic raider, this doesn't affect me, then I'm sorry to say that it does, or it will very soon, because any competitive activity needs room for growth in the upward direction, or it's just going to stagnate and die.
Yep, this is true.
With fewer and fewer Mythic Alliance guilds, Heroic Alliance guilds will start to suffer, as good Heroic players realize there's no room for advancement for them, and they'll just quit or change factions. With Heroic players quitting, Normals and Pugs will start to become worse in quality, and before long, Alliance rating will be good as dead. Alright, fine. Enough whining. Hopefully I've convinced you by now that there's an issue where a relatively small imbalance in racials has caused a large imbalance in hardcore rating populations over time. So let's try and be constructive. What can be done about this? Well, what Blizzard's likely going to do, the most commonly suggested solution, is to buff Alliance racials, nerf Horde racials, or maybe even remove all racials from competitive PvE. Unfortunately, at this point, changes here are not going to make a difference. As I've said, what's causing the faction imbalance at this point is not racials, but the population imbalance. The time to make changes like this was somewhere around Burning Crusade, which means we're about 11 years late for that at this point. One small measure that could help is some sort of rewards for getting a high ranking within your faction, like the Hall of Fame feats of strength in BFA.
This is the one. This is why I want to raid in BFA. I'm only gonna raid to kill this boss on Mythic once. I'm gonna quit, and if I don't get the title, I'm done. So this is actually a really good idea that Blizzard is doing. I think it's good for the game.
Guilds transfer to Dead Realms before for a server first, so it's possible that with so few Alliance guilds left, somebody might transfer back, because although they're top 300 Horde, they could be top 100 Alliance with a quick transfer, earning themselves a little bit of rating cred. So something like this could work, but do I think this achievement is going to make an impact? No. First of all, it offers absolutely nothing to guilds already in the top 100, meaning the imbalance at the top will remain, and as we've already said, imbalances at the top exert pressure downwards. Second of all, Warcraft logs rankings have already existed for years. If anyone cared about being top 100 Alliance, we would have already seen changes like this. Every guild that's remotely serious uses Warcraft logs and keeps track of their rankings. Hell, my guild was technically the 3rd US 2-day raiding Alliance guild to kill Argus. Does this give us any rating cred or recruitment power? Not really. So, in my opinion, the only realistic long-term solution here is to get rid of the faction divide. Make guilds cross-faction, make raiding cross-faction, make general and trade chat cross-faction. But Wonton, what about world PvP? Warcraft at its core is about orcs fighting humans. I don't know, figure out a solution. Use some sort of mercenary system like Ashran did, or some sort of faction allegiance system like other MMOs. Or fuck, make it a free-for-all battle royale game, I don't know. Warcraft 1 as a game will soon be 24 years old, and WoW is approaching age 14. It'll soon be legal for WoW to have a driver's license in some places. To continue to use the argument that the factions still can't be merged in 2018 because the game was designed with a faction split in 2004, even as the raiding population continues to hemorrhage and sub-numbers continue to drop, would be a colossal mistake. Look, at the end of the day, I'm passionate about this topic because I just want what's best for the raiding population. I love raiding in WoW, and I'm sad to see this huge faction imbalance happening. Keep in mind that for every guild that has enough money or gold to faction transfer, there's probably 10 or 100 guilds that will just quietly wither and die. And maybe some of those players will stick around as casuals, and maybe some will make the change to Horde, but many are simply gonna quit. Without changes, this is going to lead to big sub-losses, and frankly, I don't see a very bright future for WoW as long as this issue remains unaddressed. Dear Blizzard, something has to change with faction balance or it's going to be very bad for World of Warcraft.
Okay. So the problem that he identified is real. The solution that he has is wrong, right? I think that it's a stupid solution, and it doesn't. See, here's why I don't think they should get rid of faction imbalance. Like, if they wanted to, saying that you would get rid of, if you got rid of racials, that people wouldn't go back and forth, right? And more people wouldn't go back over to Alliance is wrong if you incentivize playing on Alliance with, like, these different, what do you call it? These different, like, things like this, like first 100 Alliance and US guilds. People would go back, and it would create a trickle-down effect. So I agree with his premise. I just don't agree with his solution. Removing faction imbalance at a certain, or factions entirely, I think is just a bad idea. The game is at its very core faction-based gameplay, and maybe they should re-envision the way that they want to have racials work in battlegrounds. Maybe incentivize playing different factions. They could always give people free faction transfers over to Alliance from Horde to Alliance. There are a lot of different ways that they could solve this without completely changing the way the game works, right? And I think this is one of the problems that a lot of people have, is that they find it, they see a problem, and they look for an extreme solution that is just, it's extreme, right? Like, getting rid of all of the factions is insane. I understand what he's saying, right? And they do have mercenary mode for, what do you call it? What is it? For PvP, but I don't think they really need that for raiding. And also, if they made that for raiding, like, then what would be the point of the factions? And if there were no factions, like, how would the game make any sense? And I think this is another example of somebody who spends, like, their entire time playing the game in, like, their own bubble of mythic rating or playing the game on a very high level, and they feel like the entire game should reflect and reinforce that high level of gameplay. Whereas a lot of other people don't really like, they want the Horde and Alliance dichotomy. You know, they want that. And just because some people who are mythic raiders might have a harder time, that doesn't mean that Blizzard should turn the game upside down entirely to appeal to a very, very small minority of people, right? And like it's one of those examples again. It's the same as like, you know, like changing, like getting rid of Master Loot to make like method raiders happy or something like that. Is that really better for the game as a whole? No, it's not. It's just better for them. So, is in fighting side by side for grading give us like 3 fighting expansions? Not really. I mean, and also like, there's always been times like where obviously a Horde and Alliance come together, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that they're always on the same side. That's what I'm really trying to say, right? So I think the video is definitely an interesting conversation to have. I just don't think they should get rid of factions. That's basically